The house is quiet now, but the music still knows how to find you. Tonight, we're remembering 10 R&B bands from the late 60s and 70s who gave us one unforgettable album, then slipped quietly away. No long careers, no second acts, just one perfect moment on vinyl. Back then, music didn't demand attention, it earned it. It floated through car radios on night drives, through basement parties where the lights were low and the feelings were high. You didn't rush it, you lived with it. These albums didn't just soundtrack a season, they defined one. And even though the bands vanished, the music stayed, tucked into memory, waiting for the right moment to return. And the final band on this list? If you ever slow dance to track 3, you'll remember them before we even say the name. Number 10, introducing the Whatnots by the Whatnots. Sometimes a debut doesn't sound like a beginning. It sounds like a moment fully formed, as if the artists had lived through the entire journey already and handed you only the finest parts. That's how introducing the Whatnots felt in 1970. Emerging from Baltimore and New Jersey, the Whatnots entered a world shaped by the tail end of Motown's dominance and the raw beginnings of the Philly soul sound. But they weren't imitators. Their harmonies had a softness, a pleading honesty, like someone reaching out for love without pride getting in the way. The song, "I'll Erase Away Your Pain," felt like it belonged in a room with tears and reconciliation. Their vocals were clean but emotionally tangled, smooth falsettos folded into whispers of heartbreak and hope. What made this album linger wasn't just the polish, it was the feeling that these men meant it, that they weren't chasing fame, but instead chasing connection. Behind the scenes, they worked with George Kerr, a producer who knew how to draw soul from silence. He gave them space, let the rhythm breathe, let the message land. After this record, the band didn't disappear entirely. A few singles followed, but the complete expression, the story arc, the soul narrative lived only in that one shining full length. They never released another studio album with the same spirit, and so it became their legacy. Sometimes an artist tells you everything in one breath, and it's enough to last forever. If that album whispered comfort, the next one carried fire. Number 9, High on the Hog by Black Heat. When High on the Hog dropped in 1974, it didn't just land, it stomped. It swung the door open with a funky strut, grabbed your attention, and dared you not to move. Black Heat wasn't about restraint, they were about release. The band had already shown promise with earlier work, but this album was lightning in a groove. It blended R&B, funk, and jazz fusion with the confidence of a band that knew exactly who they were. From the opening horn lines to the percussive breakdowns, High on the Hog sounded like a party built on purpose. The track Zimba Koo, with its chant-driven rhythm and driving energy, caught fire in underground clubs and radio stations that knew where to look. It felt tribal, electric, alive, like something that had existed long before records and would last long after. They weren't just playing, they were channeling something deeper. Bass lines throbbed with heartbeat urgency, horns cut through the air like declarations, and through it all, there was joy, unfiltered, unapologetic joy. But just as the world started to notice, the noise quieted. The band faded from the scene, caught in the wave of changing tastes and industry shifts. Funk was moving toward disco, and fusion toward experimental extremes. There wasn't much room left for a band like Black Heat. Still, for those who found High on the Hog, it became a kind of personal secret, a record you'd play for someone when the night got deep and you wanted to prove you knew. And once they heard it, they understood. Some albums make you feel seen, others make you feel alive. If that one danced through fire, the next walked straight into the storm. Number 8, Let's Do It Today by The Sweet Inspirations. This album wasn't their first, but it was their last with the full soul of the original group intact. Released in 1970, Let's Do It Today marked the end of an era for the Sweet Inspirations, a group whose background vocals had already shaped the sound of American music behind giants like Aretha Franklin and Elvis Presley. But here, front and center, they stepped fully into their own spotlight. There was a raw ache in every phrase, the kind of ache that doesn't perform, it remembers. Their harmonies were layered with years of gospel roots and soul trenches. You could hear the church, you could hear the heartbreak, you could hear every road stop between Alabama and New York. The title track wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. It wrapped around you like a voice you didn't know you missed. Other songs, like You Roam When You Don't Get It at Home, told the truth without blinking. These women sang about longing with the weight of lived experience. It wasn't just a record. It was a testimony. The lineup shifted after this album. Business changed, voices faded, but Let's Do It Today remained suspended in time, the last full breath of a group that had spent their lives holding up others, finally telling their own story. And maybe that's what makes it linger. There's a different kind of power in one final full expression, one that knows it might not come again. If that album felt like a curtain call, the next one arrived like a prophecy. Number 7, You're the Man by Little Beaver. Released quietly in 1974, You're the Man by Little Beaver came and went without fanfare. But for those who caught it, it felt like a personal gift. A late-night letter sealed in vinyl, addressed straight to the soul. Little Beaver, whose real name was Willie Hale, was more often heard through his guitar work than his voice. But on this album, both came together in a way that was gentle, unhurried, and deeply human. It wasn't polished for the charts. It was built for front porches, for headphones, for hearts that had been through something. The title track was a low-simmer groove, never rushing, always sure. His guitar danced around his vocals like a second voice, soft, clean, precise. Songs like We Three and Party Down felt lived in, like stories told over coffee the morning after the storm.
Everybody party down.
This wasn't a band with backup dancers and bright lights. This was a man with a guitar, a feeling, and the grace to leave space in his sound. It was an R&B record built not for noise, but for understanding. What's quietly remarkable is that You're the Man could have been the beginning of something big, but Little Beaver never made another record quite like it. The industry shifted. Funk overtook the mellow corners of soul, and this album stayed behind, quietly perfect, quietly waiting. Sometimes it's not about rising to the top. It's about arriving once, exactly where you're needed. And for many, this album arrived in the still moments and never left. If that one whispered your truth, the next one shouted its joy through the ceiling. Number 6, Finally Got Myself Together by The Impressions. By 1974, The Impressions had already weathered major change. Curtis Mayfield had moved on to a soaring solo career, and many thought the group would dissolve quietly into memory. But Finally Got Myself Together proved there was still something sacred left in the tank. This wasn't a debut, but it felt like one. A rebirth, with Leroy Hutson stepping in for Mayfield and a shift toward a warmer, more gospel-influenced tone. The album surprised even longtime fans. It didn't shout to be heard. It simply spoke. The title track was humble and healing, a message to anyone who'd ever stumbled, looked in the mirror, and decided to try again. Its groove was gentle. Its vocals were steady. It didn't judge. It offered peace. What gave the album weight wasn't innovation. It was conviction. It came from men who had seen the other side of the hill and chose grace instead of glory. And while the public moment faded, the music did not. This record aged not like a trend, but like a truth. There's something beautiful about a band letting go of the spotlight, yet leaving behind one last room filled with soul. It would be their final truly complete statement. After that, lineups changed. releases slowed, and the harmony that once defined a generation gave way to silence. But Finally Got Myself Together still floats through the air like a Sunday morning that turned out just right. If this one healed the heart, the next band lit the fuse and let the fire speak. If these songs are stirring something in you, some quiet memory or long-lost feeling, subscribing helps keep those stories alive. Just one click keeps the music playing. Number 5, Cold Blood by Cold Blood. When Cold Blood's self-titled debut dropped in 1969, it didn't slip into the scene. It kicked the door down. Here was a band that blended R&B, soul, and horn-fueled rock with a ferocity that felt alive in your chest. And at the heart of it all was Lydia Pence, a voice that didn't ask for space. It commanded it. From the opening notes, this album moved like a live wire. I'm a Good Woman was bold and unflinching, drenched in mention, and delivered with the kind of grit that left no room for doubt.
I'm a good woman, such a good woman.
The band behind her, tight, brassy, unapologetically raw, played like they'd been waiting for this moment all their lives. It was the late 60s, and everything was in flux. Music was crossing borders, bending genres, breaking rules. And Cold Blood fit right into that collision. They weren't here to smooth things over. They were here to testify with amps turned up and hearts wide open. What's remarkable is how complete this album felt. It didn't meander. It didn't play safe. It made its case, left its mark, and walked away without looking back. The group would go on to make more records, but none quite captured the lightning in a bottle power of that first offering. Later albums softened. This one burned. For some, Cold Blood became a secret anthem. For others, a glimpse of what soul could sound like when it broke free of tradition and danced with fire. One album, one shot, and for many, one unforgettable flame. If that one charged like a storm, the next moved like a prayer. Number 4, Don't Fight the Feeling by Pieces of a Dream. Released in 1981, Don't Fight the Feeling was a quiet revolution, a debut that didn't raise its voice but somehow managed to shift the temperature of the room. At just 17 years old, drummer Curtis Harmon and keyboardist James Lloyd brought a sound that was polished but personal, youthful but wise. Rooted in Philadelphia, Pieces of a Dream straddled the edge between jazz fusion and smooth R&B. But this album leaned into the soul side more than any of their later works. The title track felt like late-night city lights, slow-moving, amber-glow music for people who'd lived a little and were just learning how to exhale again. Grooves glided, never rushed. Bass lines rolled like warm rivers. The melodies carried you without asking much in return. This wasn't background music. It was in-between moments music, the kind that plays as you drive home alone or sit quietly watching the rain tap against the window. There's a moment in the track Warm Weather where everything just hangs. The beat, the chord, the air itself. And in that stillness, you remember how music can be both mirror and medicine. They went on to carve out a strong jazz career, but this album, this blend of R&B soul and youthful clarity, stood apart. It captured a fleeting moment before they matured into a different sound, before the polish took over the pulse, and so it remains, like a photograph that never faded, quietly brilliant. Some albums raised the roof. This one closed the door, dimmed the lights, and sat beside you. If that album held your hand, the next one took you by the collar and told you to listen. Number 3, Don't Let Go by Roy Ayers Ubiquity. By 1979, Roy Ayers had already become a master of crossing boundaries. Jazz, funk, soul, he blended them all with ease. But with Don't Let Go, credited to Roy Ayers Ubiquity, something different happened. This was no longer just an exploration, it was a culmination. The album hit with a warmth that felt immediate but never hurried. Tracks like Don't Let Go and Freaky Deaky shimmered with groove and sensuality, wrapping themselves around your senses like the scent of summer on concrete after rain. There was rhythm, but also restraint, joy, but also depth. It was the kind of record that could move a dance floor or soothe a restless heart. And while Ayers had always been a vibraphonist with vision, here the Ubiquity Band locked in with him like a single pulse. Their synergy wasn't showy, it was soulful. But after this album, the Ubiquity name faded. Roy Ayers continued, yes, remarkably so. But the full band magic that lived in Don't Let Go seemed to vanish as quickly as it arrived. Later work was often excellent, but this album stood alone in its blend of clarity and collective fire. What made it last wasn't just the sound, it was the feeling. That moment when music lets you lean back, close your eyes, and forget about the ticking of the clock. One record, one wave of emotion, and for many, one perfect entry point into a world that vanished just as they were falling in love with it. If this one felt like a groove made of silk, the next struck like thunder wrapped in velvet. Number 2, Material Things by Steve Arrington's Hall of Fame. In 1983, something curious happened. A voice stepped out from behind the drums, and it didn't just sing, it testified. Steve Arrington, already known for his work with the funk outfit Slave, formed his own group and released Steve Arrington's Hall of Fame. The album Material Things was its crown jewel. From the first track, there was a sense that this wasn't just another funk record. There was a movement, yes, but also message. Nobody Can Be You But You didn't ask for applause, it offered affirmation. It said, you matter just as you are.
Nobody can be you but you. Nobody, no.
Steve's vocals were unusual in the best way. High, sincere, almost conversational. He didn't belt. He spoke through melody, letting the beat walk beside him rather than behind. The band followed suit, rapping each track in thick bass, rhythm guitar, and keys that didn't dazzle. They embraced. The title track rode a slick groove, but it never lost its soul. It was social commentary hidden inside a dance floor anthem, and that was the secret to the whole album. It made you move, but it also made you feel something more than rhythm. Despite its brilliance, this version of the Hall of Fame wouldn't return with a follow-up that captured the same spirit. Arrington would go solo soon after. The band dissolved like smoke, leaving behind one perfect groove-laden time capsule. For many, Material Things wasn't just music. It was a reminder of identity, of confidence, of joy in one's own skin. Some records take you out into the world. This one brought you home. If that one gave you strength, the final entry gave you shelter. Number 1, Mood by The Sylvers. By the early 1980s, The Sylvers had already seen fame. They'd brought hits like Boogie Fever into living rooms and dance halls across America.
Boogie fever, I think it's going around.
But in 1982, they released Bizarre, an album that, despite its title, held a moment of pure, centered grace. A track simply called Mood. It was not a single. It didn't top any charts. But for those who found it, Mood was unforgettable. The Sylvers were a family group, and by this point, their sound had matured. The disco gloss had faded. What remained was honesty. Clean vocals, restrained arrangements, and harmonies that felt like shared memory. Mood captured all of that. It was slow, steady, and deeply emotional. A quiet storm ballad with no storm, just still waters.
On the corner where she stood, looking for any man.
The track moved like reflection, a voice thinking aloud, a melody remembering something it wasn't sure it could hold on to. There was no urgency, no climax, just presence. And then, as softly as it arrived, it was gone. The group didn't release another album with that same sense of intimacy. Life moved on, styles changed, but that one song, tucked inside an overlooked album, became a kind of secret sanctuary for those who needed it. It wasn't fame that made this moment matter. It was its existence. The knowledge that someone, somewhere, once put that feeling to tape and sent it into the world. And sometimes, that's all we ask from music, that it meets us where we are and stays there, quietly. Some albums arrive like beginnings. Others feel like farewells dressed in brilliance. These 10 bands gave us something that didn't stretch across decades or overflow with follow-ups. They gave us one perfect album, one flash of clarity, one story that never needed a sequel. And maybe that's why we remember them. Not despite the silence that followed, but because of it. Because the music didn't fade. It stood still, waiting for us to come back, year after year, needle after needle, memory after memory. Thank you for remembering them with me tonight. If any of these albums brought back a face, a place, or a time in your life, you're not alone. That's what soul music does. It remembers for us. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, feel free to subscribe. There's no rush, just a quiet invitation to keep the music close. Next time, we'll open another door, maybe a year, maybe a forgotten label, maybe a voice that never should have been lost. It's waiting on the end screen right now. 10 R&B bands destroyed by their own manager. I'll see you there.